Hello, and welcome back to the Peptides for Women podcast. I'm Jennifer Woodward, very excited to welcome Dr. Dean Jones to the show today. Dr. Dean Jones is a doctor of chiropractic and the lead of the coaching department at his nationwide GLP-1 telemedicine practice, where he's personally coached over 1,000 patients through sustainable weight loss using his FLOA, or Fasting Like Our Ancestors protocol. But his expertise didn't come from textbooks. It came from a 20-year personal battle with obesity that started at age 16 when he lost 100 pounds. After losing and regaining 50 pounds every single year throughout his teens and 20s, even while managing gyms and training clients, Dr. J discovered the missing piece wasn't willpower or calories, but insulin resistance. Through years of experimentation with intermittent fasting, extended fasting protocols, and eventually microdose GLP-1s, he not only solved his own metabolic dysfunction, but developed a systematic approach that's now helping thousands escape the yo-yo cycle. His message is a controversial one. GLP-1 medications like Ozempic and Mounjaro should be short-term tools, not lifetime dependencies, and proper coaching can help people taper off while maintaining results. Dr. J combines his clinical experience as a DC, personal transformation story, and work alongside medical prescribers to bridge the gap between pharmaceutical intervention and sustainable lifestyle change. He is the author of Fast, Feast, and Flourish, and runs one of the most watched YouTube channels on GLP-1 education, where he breaks down complex metabolic science into actionable protocols. Dr. J, welcome to the show. Now, this is the Peptides for Women show, but we've been increasingly experimenting with men, and our audience loves it. So we are really, really excited to have your backstory, your expertise, and your knowledge of peptides on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. And I want to dive right into something you said. The phase afterwards, right? Like short-term tools. So when I first started this in a clinical setting with patients, that was my thought process. That was my goal. Like, we're going to use this short-term tools. Oh my gosh, use a medication. Like, but it's the best situation right now. We're going to use it short term, right? But really, after a few more years of getting to see the science unravel with GLP-1s and how much more amazing health benefits we're seeing that go far beyond just diabetes and obesity, but realizing how chronic in nature obesity is, I think now the better way to frame that is microdosing maintenance. Are there people that are going to be able to completely wean off? Absolutely, there are. It's going to be hard work, regardless of who you are, but it will be impossible, even for the most mentally challenging individuals. So you have some people that just will not be able to wean off. They're going to need some amount, and then there's going to be people who can. But regardless, it's going to take enough mental toughness. And the reality is that's great if you have one of those in mind as an initial goal, but you got to go through the motion. You got to heal the body. You got to reverse insulin resistance, control your inflammation, among many other things. And then you find out. You find out through trial and error. Can I actually completely wean off, or should I microdose? And I kind of feel like, why even at this point work towards weaning off now that we're seeing microdosing? I mean, I go as far as to say I think everybody should be microdosing GLP-1s just to even the playing field with how much endocrine disrupting crap that there is out there. It's like I said, it evens the playing field. So I just wanted to clarify that's my mission. That's our vision there.
I actually love that you brought that up because that is one of the most common questions I get, and you probably get. If I'm not mistaken, you're currently on 5 milligrams of tirzepatide once a month. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is that something that you would kind of guide your clients toward doing after a insulin resistance protocol and a fasting protocol once a month? I haven't really heard much of that, so tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is we don't have researched protocols on microdosing entirely, let alone different styles. But it's either I look at two types. There's either a bigger hit less frequently, every 2, every 3, every 4 weeks, or there's some sort of low dose, lower than the starter dose, so lower than 2.5 of tirzepatide, lower than 0.25 of semaglutide on a weekly basis. And when I look at both, this is just from my own personal experience and seeing patients do both. I like the idea of the bigger hit, less frequent, because it gives you time to resensitize to the medication. So it's always going to be optimally working because the body does develop some sort of resistance to it over time. And when you're completely off, you're on your own. You don't get the aid. So it's sink or swim. And it forces you to get your other stuff together because you're on your own. You don't have the aid. But then every, repetitive cycle there, that cadence allows you to get that help again.
Mhm.
So for me personally, and a lot of patients that I've worked with, it's a reminder. Because if you have that chronic obesity in the background, which I'm just going to say for the sake of this point in the conversation, dysregulated eating, like I
Mhm.
have that, and I've had that my entire life. And so, without the medication, it seems like I can just eat a lot before I get full. And so, it's a good reminder how much I know the difference between how much I need versus how much my body's telling me. It's still dysregulated, and so being able to get reminded every 3 to 4 weeks is really nice. So,
Please keep going.
oh yeah, no, you're good. So yeah, I think it's in my opinion, probably the more favorable way to microdose for all those reasons. And but we don't have research on this, so at the end of the day, you can't say which one's better. I'm just sharing clinical experience, my perspective, understanding the mechanisms, and what I'm seeing. So we do
Mhm.
have patients, and we've tried both ways, and I see a more favorable response from people who cycle on and off in that stage.
Interesting. At what point in your own journey did you move your dose down to once a month?
Probably tried that for the first time maybe a year ago. Maybe a year
Mhm.
ago was the first time I kind of experimented with that, and it's been my favorite way. So I'm definitely probably like having tried both. This is the way to go, in my opinion. For me, at least, I found my optimal scenario for maintenance.
I will definitely be playing around with this. That's very, very interesting to me. I'm assuming that you have a lot of clients who are also doing the same.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And what's the general length of time before you move someone from weekly dosing to monthly dosing?
You know, it ideally, I think you stay on the medication weekly until you are completely at your goal weight and metabolically healed. So people get confused metabolic healing with weight loss. They're like a Venn diagram, right? There's a lot of crossover, but there's a lot of separation too as well. And so just because you lose weight does not mean you heal your metabolic health and vice versa. So if you do this right from the beginning, the journey starts from the beginning. Like your weight loss goal, that program should be more about focusing on fixing metabolic health. So if you do that from day number one, then yes, you will lose weight as a symptom of that. And so you handle both. If you maximally heal, which we still don't have a consensus on what that even means, but I think most experts would agree it means healing insulin resistance,
Mhm.
controlling your inflammation, getting some sort of balance and harmony to your hormones. Once you do that, then yeah, you can begin that journey of starting to decrease. And so however long it takes for an individual to accomplish that, anywhere from 3 to 9 months, I think just depends also how much weight do they need to lose too.
Okay. A couple things I wanted to revisit with you. One, you did talk about microdosing, and we just had a whole episode about this where there's no general consensus of what that term actually means. So, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, if you average it to me, it means if you average out the dose on a weekly basis, you're doing less than the starter, right? So because I do monthly, right, five per month, but if you divide that, that's about 1.25 per week. So at whatever frequency you're doing, if you divide that to a weekly and it's lower than the starter dose, to me,
Mhm.
you're in that microdosing category.
Okay. All right. All right. I like that definition. That is not what I've heard before, but absolutely makes sense. Appreciate that.
You love how everybody's just making up their own definitions at
They,
this point, right?
I know. We
I
don't know what it means, but hey, none of us are on the full dose. So there
yeah,
you go.
yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about your story too, because as we, talked about in your intro, you're not just a clinician. You've lived this. You've lived this hardcore for, a long time. After losing weight dozens of times, regaining it dozens of times, what finally helped you understand why people regain weight and what breaks that cycle for good?
Yeah, so I have the interesting perspective of doing it before GLP-1s and then doing it again with GLP-1s, and I'll
Mhm.
explain that in a second. But yeah, I lost the weight, struggled, like you said, for multiple years, and then it was fasting. So for me, it was. I remember when I first learned about intermittent fasting way back in the day. John Berardi, if you remember him, PhD, was big on fasting and
Mhm.
the lean gains method. I think Mark Bikram, I think
Martin.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. One of the earliest people to talk about it, and I was so indoctrinated to like you got to eat protein every 3 hours. Like, oh my gosh, you're gonna lose muscle, and so it took me a year to just like start intermittent fasting, and then I was just blown away. Like it provided stability in my weight. It didn't entirely handle it, but it just the amount of weight fluctuation decreased without changing anything else, just decreasing my window. So I'm like, all right, so let's start long fasting. So I just kept pushing it, pushing it, pushing it, trying because prolonged fasting is very ambiguous. That's why I created
Mhm.
Flow. There's no protocols, there's no consensus. There's a lot more clarity on intermittent. I think most people like the 16/8 seems to be the most popular method. But when you get into prolong, yeah, I mean, there's like different ways to do it, but there's no consensus. So, I landed on Flow after a lot of trial and error with myself, but after doing that for several months, then I really achieved the best type of stability at that point in my life I had ever had in my weight. And so I look at that and go, well, what did I do? Because I didn't know what I was doing at that time. Like what I was doing was fixing my metabolic health. What I was doing was fixing my insulin resistance. I was reducing my inflammatory levels. And so I achieved stability from just doing that. But it was hard. It was hard. Fasting without GLP-1s for long periods of time on a weekly basis is not easy. And clinically, I'd gotten a lot of patients that were ready for the challenge to do that without GLP-1s. So being able to help people without GLP-1s versus with them, I was like, oh my gosh, this was the thing. I mean, we used phentermine, putting people on phentermine on long fasting days to help them is certainly a way, and I would still use that if GLP-1s didn't exist. But my providers, the ones prescribed, so I'm lucky enough to be able to work with prescribing physicians. But yeah, I mean, seeing both GLP-1s now, it's like the missing piece. It's the missing piece to this because it makes fasting easier while working on metabolic health in the background. So it's just an amazing synergy.
I do love that you brought that up because you're in clinical practice and you're probably quantifying some of these numbers. You're saying, like, when we fix metabolic health, when we reduce inflammation, what does that look like on the labs for your patients and clients?
Yeah, when we look at, and again, that's another thing, like what's the consensus of that? But I try to keep it simple. So for inflammation panels, ESR, CRP, keeping those on the lower end of the reference range for metabolic health and insulin resistance, specifically fasting insulin, C-peptide, getting those on the lower end of the reference range. And then if the patient has a glucose monitor, that's cool to just kind of look at the glucose levels. But I find even that's not like I don't need it. I don't require it. If they have a CGM, it's kind of cool. Yeah, I like to see
Yeah.
that, but definitely don't need it. I would say those panels are pretty much the most telling. And then thyroid would be a whole other conversation. But
Sure. Have you seen thyroid markers come back into balance with the flow protocol?
sometimes,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, you know, the interesting thing about thyroid is that you kind of have like two, especially in the GLP-1 world. So in the GLP-1 world specifically, because there's so much appetite suppression, so much metabolic downregulation taking place, these doctors can't tell the difference between true clinical hypothyroid situation that requires medication versus, hey, this person's been eating 1,000 calories for several months. They don't need thyroid med. You just got to do a reverse diet and get them out of the metabolic downregulation. And if you're looking at the labs, you'll see free T3, conversion increase. You'll see reverse T3 drop. Like you see dramatic improvement and it looks like you're curing their hypothyroidism. Well, they never had hypothyroidism. They just had metabolic downregulation because they've been freaking starving and they had no idea they were starving. See, but prior to GLP-1 world, people were never starving. It rarely that's why it makes me laugh because you'll see so many influencers outside of the GLP-1 world say starvation doesn't exist. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. And it's like, no, no, no. You just outside of the GLP-1 world, it's just really hard because now you have to rely on yourself to actually starve yourself. Your body's freaking screaming for food. Without GLP-1s, like you're not going to find that many people starving. So it's just kind of funny to see that.
That is kind of funny. With my clients, I talk a lot about functional starvation. So maybe they're not starving for calories, but they're starving for minerals like potassium and sodium. They're starving for protein. A lot of my women, they're not meeting their protein goals. So while they aren't necessarily, they're not too skinny, right? Because they're like starving themselves. They really just aren't optimizing their diet. And so that's one of the things that we really seek to do is get in there and dial in minerals, do some hair tissue mineral testing, making sure that we're optimizing macros, yes, but micros is more important for me, for my women. So is
Nice.
that something you're looking at too when you are writing your GLP-1 protocols?
Not as much, but we work a little bit more, I would say, on like larger scale, generalized metabolic health protocols. I have some really amazing functional practitioners that I refer to when we have people that the general protocol doesn't work, and then we refer out. So we kind of keep it more generalized on protocols that kind of work more on a widespread basis. So.
Okay. Yeah, well, and that's something I think you're known for is peptide stacking, right? So in normal person language, what does peptide stacking mean, and how do you decide which peptides work together for fat loss, for muscle building, or lowering inflammation?
Yeah, so it's cool about peptides is it's like I love the way Dr. Seeds describes it as the language of the human body. I mean, and that's what we're really dealing with here is chemical messengers. The body releases these peptides, and it's the way that organs and tissues communicate to other organs and tissues. So I'm talking to a patient, the easiest thing that they can think of is a hormone. Like a hormone is something that like, oh, I've heard of a hormone, like they get released and they do stuff. That's kind of what peptides do. It's close enough, right? In fact, a lot of physiology books interchange the word peptide and hormone, which is a whole nother, rabbit hole of like, what's the difference? It gets kind of nuanced there. But yeah, close enough to the idea of a hormone, small chains of amino acids that are strung together, very, very small proteins. And there's thousands of different peptides in the human body. And science has now gotten to the point where we've made in the lab hundreds of them. Imagine a world where if we had every single peptide the human body has available on the shelf for a doctor to prescribe, that'd be kind of cool. Makes you wonder how many medications would actually be needed, right? But I think medications, if they were actually used the way they should be, by the way, I think they're great if they were used correctly. They're just obviously far from that, right? So, but yeah, peptides are essentially that. Just when you prescribe peptides, when our doctors prescribe peptides, we're just supplementing the body's own natural processes, optimizing physiology. So that's the way I like to think about them. Is like you can't go in there and fix a person with just peptides. You got to get that base in. You got to get the lifestyle strategies to fix the base, but you can certainly optimize. And there's a lot of cool optimization things that we do.
Ooh, like what?
Yeah, so probably the coolest thing I think in the GLP-1 world is the way that we use the fat mobilizers. So like AOD 9604 is probably our most number one use. I think Sloop 332 is starting to increase now more, but AOD is a fragment of the human growth hormone. So it's I call it a fat mobilizer because that's what we use it for. It's known for its ability to mobilize fat. Well, in the trial data, it didn't really like the results weren't too great. So that's why a lot of doctors just think it's like not really a great peptide. That's why it never got researched beyond its initial phases and just kind of died out, right? There's not much hype over it. But for me, I'm hyping on the AOD all the time because of the way we use it. So we use it as a fasting bridge, as a fasting aid. So, and this is, fasting like our ancestors, right? Fasting is to me is like the most powerful lifestyle intervention that we do to drive and improve physiology. And so you obviously know very well that for a lot of patients, women in particular, but some men, diabetics, autoimmune patients, like this whole concept of like, is fasting bad? A lot of individuals, a lot of doctors are comfortable saying that because they've seen firsthand the detrimental effects of people getting into some of these longer fasting protocols.
Mhm.
So why is that, right? So in my opinion, this is like my working theory based off of the positive results that we're getting, is that you put people into these cortisol-inducing situations, and it's like beyond, I call it like a stress threshold. There's like a stress threshold for their body, and people that are just generally more unhealthy, that stress threshold is lower. So how can we reduce the stress of a
Mhm.
long fast? Well, what is the stressful activity of a long fast? It's asking the body to mobilize and feed itself, right? Let's say you do a 24-hour fast, that's an average of 2,000 calories. You're asking the body to be able to mobilize and feed itself 2,000 calories worth of energy. And probably the insulin levels are high, blocking that. So now you have a counter signal insulin that keeps those fat cells on lockdown, so you can't even get into the fat. And that's why the body has to rely on more and more cortisol and stress hormones. So giving a fat mobilizing agent like AOD, you
Mhm.
have something powerful that can override that, release the fat, so that when the individual is fasting, when they're fasting, they can actually utilize that energy. So essentially, to me, all AOD does, I say all it does, it's still really powerful. But what it's really doing is just overriding that decreasing the stress response that would have been otherwise induced from the long fast and push them over that stress threshold and allow them to get into some really cool deep fasting protocols, which is ultimately what they need to heal the insulin resistance.
Hmm.
That's kind of how we use it. That's like probably the coolest kind of stack I think that we do.
That is definitely a cool stack and one I've not heard of. You said it's a fragment. So it's like Summerellin, Tesamorelin, Ipamorelin, but like fragment of one of those?
Yeah, well, so
Yeah.
those are growth hormone secretagogues. So those
Uh-huh.
are actually causing the release of your own endogenous growth hormone from your pituitary gland. But this is a fragment of the actual HGH molecule. So specifically, it's the fat loss fragment of it. So you're not getting any of the other growth hormone. You're just getting the fat mobilizing piece. It works on those beta adrenergic receptors on your fat cells, and so it causes the mobilization and lipolysis of those fat cells, which you know, if you're not fasting, if you're not getting into calorie deficits, yeah, the trial data is going to suck. You're just going to mobilize your fat and restore it. That's why to me, GLP-1s are always like your base fat loss stack. Like all the other fat loss peptides are really cool, but it's like GLP-1 first because this one's actually helping you get into a calorie deficit and it's lowering insulin levels and it's lowering inflammation. That's your base. But then you can stack the AOD, get them into fasting. Now we're getting some real results.
Absolutely. GLP-1s are just the tip of the iceberg. I want to talk to you more about that. That is very interesting. I did want to circle back just a second. We talked about some of the thyroid labs, some of the thyroid markers, and just the physiology of the thyroid, especially for people who are using peptides. One of the questions I do get a lot is that medullary thyroid cancer, scare that people are having if you are on GLP-1 specifically. And then, people are worried about cancer just in general, like NAD plus, BPC 157, TB 500. Can you speak to that a little bit? Maybe calm people's fears?
Yeah, I think so. A couple things to kind of think of. So it was rodent data. It was rodent data, but nonetheless, we can't potentially like conclusively rule it out that it wouldn't potentially extrapolate to humans, which is why they had that box label. Um, but since then, there has been additional research that's been done that's only strengthened the idea and hypothesis that it's not actually extrapolated towards humans. So there's been additional data that's been done to show that it's likely and getting closer to I think where they possibly will be able to remove that concern, but they just haven't yet. So I think like it's still ultimately such a big deal that you should pay attention to that. And if you specifically have a history of medullary cancers in your family, you should stay away until we know otherwise. But the data is trending in the direction that it looks like it's not an issue, not a concern. And we have all these research to show that. So
Okay. What about some of the other peptides like NAD plus or BPC 157?
yeah, so we use BPC a lot, BPC and
Mm-hmm.
KPV.
Mm-hmm.
That's our super anti-inflammatory stack. I mean, everybody has freaking chronic inflammation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I do those labs more for the benefit of the patient. I already know if they're overweight, they're inflamed, but it helps them to get some objective reality on it and they can see
Mm-hmm.
it. But if it's really high, then we really are pushing for BPC, KPV. We also do a lot of low dose naltrexone, which is
Yeah.
obviously a medication, but it's in the class of these anti-aging cool molecules. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, the our powerhouse anti-inflammatory stack would be the BPC, KPV oral pills. We have them
Yeah.
stacked together in like 500 microgram capsules. And I've really seen those inflammatory markers drop rapidly, even in autoimmune patients when we get them on that, especially when we stack it with LDN. And as you know, the GLP-1 is also very anti-inflammatory. So that's four powerful agents that are all relatively pretty dang safe when you use them correctly, just driving that inflammation down so the patient can heal and move forward. So
Yeah. That's a pretty powerful stack against a Western lifestyle. It almost might overcome a Western lifestyle.
yeah, well, and then imagine if we can get them out of that Western lifestyle and get them
Yes.
eating freaking clean. We do. I'm pro carnivore, dietary wise. I don't and push it. I'm not in the place as, and I have a lot of respect for Ken Baker or Dr. Sean Baker. I had interviewed him once, and Ken Berry, and I'm not quite there yet and convinced that carnivore is the optimal human diet for everybody. But anybody who's been overweight, I'm comfortable saying if you're up for the challenge, do a freaking carnivore diet for 3 6 months. It's an elimination diet. Get all the crap out that's probably that you're reacting to. Let's heal up. Let's drop some weight. Let's feel a ton better. And then let's play a game of reintroducing some freaking foods back so that we can sustain the health in the future, and find out what is potentially still problematic for you.
Yeah, I've had some good success with clients on the carnivore diet. Myself, not so much. I did it for 3 months and didn't drop any weight. My gut was not any better. But I do like the idea of it and the process. And especially for women in midlife, making sure that they're getting enough protein. Like it can be a really healing diet for that. And then I have a lot of clients with gut issues. So calming down some of the inflammation in the gut can definitely be helpful. But I have to say, more exciting for me, just in my personal health journey, was the addition of my GLP-1 and then VPC 157. Way more helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's just you're just taking them, right? So it's easy. It's easy to implement. It's not a dramatic change. Carnivore definitely, obviously, for some people, like that's why to me it's like, are you up for the challenge? That's how I phrase it to patients. Like, are you up for the challenge? Because if they're like, yeah, like you're telling me it could be helpful. Yes, I am. They're like, okay, cool, I'll do it. Versus someone that's like, no, I can't stand meat. It's like, okay, well then let's not do that. So
Yep. Oh, I do love meat, man. We have 4 kids, so if probably 5 times a week my husband is barbecuing for the kids. If I try to cook, they're like, "Why didn't Dad barbecue?" Like, good point. We're having meat again, kids. I do want to talk about something you brought up because your videos. You sent me over a couple of videos on YouTube that you're prolific on YouTube, a educator on that channel on Instagram. And in your videos, you talk about people increasing their GLP-1 dose the wrong way. So, what are some of the signs that somebody should pause and support their body instead of just jumping to a higher dose?
if you're struggling to eat enough food, this is the hands down, without a doubt. Like, and it's so like I'll tell this. I have this like little thing, this way that I describe it. Like you take this medication to, for the first time in your life, gain the ability to actually stop eating when you want to stop eating, right? I get it. Like that's what obesity is, dysregulated hunger. You've always wanted to, you can do it in moments, but chronically you just can't do it consistently. You always lose the battle against your body always wins, you're overeating, right? So you start this medication and you're like, oh my gosh, I just gained a new ability. I get to decide when I'm done eating. It's like, that's it's massive, it's powerful. And now you're going to tell me, right, like to the patient, I have to eat more than I feel like eating. It really like screws with their mind. And I thought we do a lot of mindset training on just that and understanding the separation between you and your body, because they're different. We don't have to get too philosophical or spiritual, but I am a big proponent of understanding the difference. You could eat or not eat when your body's telling you to eat or not eat. They're two different things. And so when it comes to this situation, and the caloric intake, like if we chronically undereat over an extended period of time, it's like clockwork. It'll happen for some people within weeks. It'll happen for some patients within months. Some every now and then, some people are lucky and they can just starve off 100 pounds and they just keep losing the weight. It's like that was easy. For most patients, that's not the case. Their body's ability to stop that weight loss, downregulate the metabolism, is happening very, very quickly. So the way that you prevent that is you make sure that you don't excessively undereat. You have to eat enough food. You have to get enough, like you said earlier, micronutrients. You have to get enough protein, and you have to get enough calories. It's a
Mhm.
combination of all three. And so if you're chronically undereating, that's a problem. And so for me, one of the easiest signs to know that you're probably dosed too high is if you're struggling to eat. Like the sweet spot, the sweet dosing spot is the edge is off. I could eat good, I can eat healthy most of the time, right? But I still have enough hunger and appetite. I still get cravings occasionally, but I can control them. That's the other piece of it. If you dose too high and you have like no hunger, I know that's appealing. That sounds kind of awesome. I tried it. I wanted to see what that feels like. I'm sure, like to have no hunger, it's cool, but then you realize how that's problematic, because then you lose the mental toughness. You lose the ability to control your cravings. We live in a world full of hyper palatable, delicious, readily accessible foods that are freaking cooked with the worst ingredients. And that's going to be around us for the rest of our life. And so we have to get mentally tougher at doing that. And so when you dose too high and you have no control, you don't earn that ability. So in a nutshell, you don't strengthen that mindset. So in a nutshell, if you're struggling to eat, and you're looking at the amount, even without counting your calories, most people can just intuitively go, I'm under eating. Like I'm looking at how much food I'm eating. Like this doesn't make sense. Like I'm a 200-pound individual and I'm eating a couple bites. Like this doesn't make sense to me. Like this can't be good. I know everybody asks that question and they run through that thought process, but they're like, well, it's what everyone else is doing, and so they just roll with it.
Yeah.
So, but if I can work with patients from the beginning, which we get patients in both worlds, they're already in it or they're in the beginning, and we get that in, and we get that understanding from the beginning, so that they never get that high to begin with.
Yeah. I actually do want to get a little philosophical and spiritual. You lost and regained weight multiple times, like so many of the women and men that we probably work with. So there had to be a deeper level of healing that you had to get into in order to keep the weight off this time, even with the help of the GLP-1 and your lifestyle and foundations. So what are maybe three things you talk about with your patients and clients in the clinic from a mindset perspective, philosophical or spiritual, that really moves the needle for them with regards to their weight loss journey?
Ooh, okay. So number one, just understanding that you're not your body. Like just understanding that there's you and that there's your body, right? And many religions and many spiritual beliefs have a system of some sort of framework of this, right? When you understand that you are your own thing, and you have your own drives and impulses and desires, and then your body has it as well. Just understanding that separation does give you a lot of control, because most people, I think, are in no sense at all connected with that separation. And so when their body tells them they're hungry, they assume and think that means I'm hungry. That means I need to eat. There's no separation. But the moment you can understand that, and fasting really does help with
Mhm.
that, by the way.
Yeah.
Fasting, and that's why a lot of religions recommend fasting protocols, because it makes you realize and confront the reality of, I just went freaking 4 days. If you are not saying that I recommend 4 day fasting protocols, but if you do something that long, you realize I'm fine. I'm here. I'm like, the waves of hunger, they came and went. That means that's a signal and not necessarily me. I'm fine now, right? So I think whether you get it, whether you accomplish that from fasting, or whether you just adopt it because it makes sense to you, just getting that framework and understanding the separation, I think, is super powerful. Because like I said, having the skill set of being able to say no to food and accomplish and do a regular long fasting is part of the, in my opinion, a long fast is good for maintaining health for the rest of your life. Like you do that on a less frequent basis, but you do it still regularly, and it's easy to stay metabolically primed when you do that. So I'd say that's for sure number one.
Mhm.
um, Interesting. You want two more things that are in that category of.
One will work. One will work.
Okay, good. I think that's it. I think that's a good one.
Yeah. No, that's a great one. I appreciate it. That's really good. And that kind of segues into my next question, because you talked about this. Many of my clients, many of my customers, they've had this background of emotional eating, binge eating, compulsive eating. That's literally my story too. I've had a history of bulimia since I was 15. Within a week of being on my microdose, low dose of GLP-1, that switch turned off. It's been a year now. And so I talk about that story all the time, because for someone who struggles with that sort of addiction in your brain, it feels kind of hopeless. And so being able to have a tool like this almost feels miraculous when your brain has been, tuned to one channel for so long. And so in your clinic with your clients, if someone has binge eating or emotional eating patterns, a GLP-1 can help. How does that work? And then are you also providing some sort of, therapy, or habit work alongside it? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, eating disorders are real, and so some patients are just not going to be able to do the protocol. I think it's really, really important that we understand like where we're coming from. And so when we get patients that have some pretty severe eating disorders, we just have a conversation with them about our protocol, and it does incorporate a lot of fasting. And so normally we're doing a lot less fasting. We're just kind of seeing where they're at with their disorder. Do you have somebody you're working with? Do you feel like you're in control of it? Understand that fasting might trigger it. And so, the reality is a fasting based protocol might not be the best solution for everybody with eating disorders, and then I just refer out. I have seen patients though do well with it. They do
Mhm.
great, and so fast, feast, and flourish is meant to be a healing cadence where you're fasting to heal your body specifically with a reason. and then you're feasting to nourish your body afterwards. See, that's a decision that you make versus an eating disorder that's really out of your control, and it's not with that process and goal in mind. So I think if it becomes that, then obviously you shouldn't do a fasting based approach. So
Sure. Cool. I love it. That's really helpful. Thank you. One of the things I reached out to you about that I really did want to talk about is something I saw you post about today, and I think yesterday too, is this new research that's coming out on addiction and craving. So the research that we do have does show that GLP-1s can reduce cravings for alcohol, sugar, and even drugs. And then you were talking about a new trial that researchers are starting to try to gain participants for with regards to a new class of GLP-1s, correct? And addiction. Can you talk about that a little?
yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating stuff. It really does help us gain appreciation for and a better understanding of where this dysregulated hunger comes from because we don't know, right? Like, is it genetic driven? Is it biology, physiology driven? Is it toxin driven? I kind of think the combo of all of the above that ends up with this excessive dysregulated hunger. So what I saw so far from it is that we are literally tapping into the same pathways in the brain, right? The dopamine pathways in the brain that are in the hypothalamus are being modulated and improved through the use of GLP-1s. And so when you do that, people that have these dysregulated patterns in there are showing like some dramatic improvement. Like I've seen patients with gambling, shopping, like all sorts of their unique situations that they were addicted to, that were compulsive, that were out of their control. Drinking, obviously, being a big one. Drinking, smoking, those are the bigger ones. The other ones were less common, but I've seen those cases improve too as well. So something about modulating and calming down that pathway in the brain,
Mhm.
that's what GLP-1s were already doing. So now they're just figuring out how to isolate that with these new medications. So I think it's great, and I'm excited to see that and probably eventually Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases that we're probably going to see GLP-1s become first line of treatment for. Super exciting.
It really is exciting. That is fascinating. I will say I'm still waiting for my tirzepatide to calm down my shopping addiction, but all of my other addictions seem like they've been pacified a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the shopping, right? So this goes back to the body versus you. So maybe the shopping is not your body and it's just you just love shopping. GLP-1 is not going to fix that if you just love shopping, you know?
That is a great way to put it. You fixed me. That's right. That's exactly right. I do love shopping. Oh man. Okay. So I did want to talk with you a little bit too about like safety and sourcing of peptides. In your clinic, you have physicians that write prescriptions for peptides while you're working with clients alongside those foundational protocols. With clients, there also is a lot of confusion about what's safe, what's legal, and how to know if you're actually getting a real product. So, what should women and men be looking for before trusting a clinic with peptides or GLP-1s?
So I'm so torn on this because, um, so the quick answer will be prescription. Like the fact that there's a prescription means that you are getting this, not in 100% of cases, but it's in almost every case. If a doctor's prescribing it, you're getting it from a legitimate source. You're getting it from a high quality, they call it 503A or even a 503B. These are state compounding pharmacies that are FDA inspected and FDA regulated. And so you're getting your peptides from a legitimate source. The quality is there, the purity is there, so the safety is there to a much higher degree versus research chemicals. And where I was going with that is I don't want to bash people that are using research products either because it's all they can afford. And it sucks. It sucks because the reality is the safer stuff costs a lot more money. And so I just try to be real with patients and I tell them the reality is you should do your best to try to work towards the safest measures which will be, doctor prescribed 503A peptides. But if somebody's doing what they're doing, then just be safe and do what you got to do. I mean, I just hate. I kind of go back and forth on that. Like, should I just say you should never do it, or should I just try to educate on the differences between the two? and understand what you're kind of getting into. So because my mission, like I'm sure yours is to help as many people as possible. And so for the people that A, maybe can't afford it, or B, don't even have access to the doctor to prescribe it, that's the other thing too. It's like, what if it's like I can afford it, but I can't even find a doctor because where I live, it's wild. So um, all I can say is like those peptides that are researched that say not for human consumption, be careful. Do as much research as you can into maybe where you're getting it from. Understand that if it doesn't work and you are doing everything right, it may not be it just might be the peptides. The peptides
Mhm.
themselves might be lower quality. And we do get those people all the time. I tried all these peptides and then we put them onto the real stuff and all of a sudden it works. And they're like, oh,
Yes.
so
Yeah, that was me too. I tell people all the time I tried black market peptides, gray market peptides. I went through an expensive compounding pharmacy. So running the gamut of experience with those peptides. I like science. I don't like math. And I remember sitting in my kitchen just thinking, how many milliliters? How much backwater? Am I going to kill myself? What am I doing here? Really? But I don't mind experimenting on myself. But I was like, this could be a bad idea.
well, it's wild. I mean, I'm sure you see it on TikTok, these videos of people, they don't know what the hell they're taking. They're like 8 or 9 different peptides, MOTC, SS31, AOD 9604, and they feel good. And it's like, well, I appreciate your urge to take matters into your own hand and move in the right direction, but my gosh, they have no clue what they're doing. Um, are they going to hurt themselves? I mean, at least peptides, they're not pharmaceuticals, right? Like generally for the most part, you're safe, but it just, yeah, I mean, you know where that goes. So
Yep, absolutely. Anything can be taken to the extreme. Really, that's one of the reasons I appreciate your channels. I appreciate your Instagram. I appreciate your YouTube because you do seek to educate people, which I think since this is such a new thing, I mean, the peptide swell is starting and we know it is, but for a lot of people, they're not cognizant of it yet. So to get out there and talk about like your foundations, like you do in your videos, what you're talking about in your practice, something we talk about here all the time too, foundations before injections. I think that's so important for people to realize. You said it earlier in the interview, you can get to that state of metabolic optimization, but that's only if you've done some of these foundational, principles first, modulating your insulin and your blood sugar, getting your protein and your minerals. I would love to hear what are some other things that you guys do in your practice as some of those foundational tools.
yeah, yeah. So hormones is a big piece of it. I have been working with women's healthcare practitioners for a while, so putting women on hormones is something we've been doing for a very, very long time. And I mean that has so much to it. So the thyroid is one piece of it, but just getting a perimenopausal, menopausal woman to freaking feel sane again. I mean that's just massive. These poor women have been told for decades that it was a dangerous thing to do, and so a lot of them were still doing it. And like, I hope this is like I feel like $1 million, but I hope I'm okay. Like and then finally the Women's Health Initiative trial comes out and says, oh, we were wrong. By the way, it's actually not dangerous. After how many millions and millions of women had to suffer because of that bullshit study. And
Yes.
anyways, like so. So that's quality of life. Getting a woman mentally like clear so they can even think and make decisions. That's important. But then the thyroid, like that's huge. Like even when you optimize the insulin and inflammation, if somebody's clinically hypothyroid, like it's going to be tough. You need that thyroid optimized, more optimized to get the ball rolling too as well. So I actually think, I look at the hormones even more important than the peptides. Like the hormone is a
Mhm.
foundation and then peptides optimize. So I look at peptides as the optimizing piece. The foundation is the lifestyle, the insulin, the hormones, and the inflammation. So yeah, I'm lucky enough to have some awesome practitioners that I work with that work with me and we together as a team get to help these patients with that foundational work.
Oh, so exciting for so many women. I tell my clients too. I mean, the research does show that once a woman's progesterone and estrogen is optimized, the GLP-1s tend to work better from a metabolic perspective. And so it is really important for women to get out there and at least be pushing, themselves, like being an advocate for themselves with their physicians. Like, can we do some hormone testing? I know I'm in perimenopause and there's no diagnosis and, maybe everything's in my head, but can we run some testing? What would that look like for the average woman who's in her perimenopausal years? What does she ask for from her doctor?
good luck trying to get your primary care to test these things. But estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, those are your key sex hormones to be, well, not, yeah, it's testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. And then we look at metabolic health, so like we talked about earlier, fasting insulin, C-peptide for your metabolic health, inflammation panels, your CRP, ESR, and then a functional thyroid panel. So most people are just getting TSH, which is just a narrow, narrow vision, looking at free T3, free T4, reverse T3. And then of course your A1C, so that you're looking at your blood sugar over time. And then your standard CMP and CBC. Those are like, that's to us, like that's a good solid. We can get really functional and go far beyond that. But to me, that's like the base. If you can get those, I think you can work with that. And that's like one of our common panels that we do. That I think gives us enough information to start moving a good amount of people in the right direction.
Fantastic. I love that. I always tell my girls too, listen, if your GP is not going to run those labs for you, ask your OBGYN. Generally, they tend to be a little bit more open-minded, especially about some of those labs. So just keep advocating and fighting for yourself because the answers are somewhere. They might not be as close in front of you as we want them to be at this point in time, but there are lots of practitioners out there who will run those labs for you.
100%, 100%. And I always like, even before GLP-1, so the same philosophy process is over, which is like a lot of these clinics that optimize for hormones aren't looking at the big picture of overall health. And so they're pushing larger
Mhm.
amounts of hormones to get symptomatic relief because they're not getting the inflammation down, because they're not getting the blood sugar down. And so, you can rely heavily on hormones and too much on hormones, but I think that's just a short term, like a patient feels better, but they run into problems. And I see that all the time. And so there's harmony when you get a lot of these systems into balance together. You ultimately need just lower doses of everything.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like our approach towards putting women on hormones, is we are trying to use lower doses because we're trying to get lifestyle improvements.
Yes, minimum viable dose for maximum possible results,
Love
100%.
that. I love that.
Yes. Okay, I want to close with you. So tell us about maybe a day in the life, what your peptide stack looks like, what your nutrition and exercise and supplement stack looks like. We'd love to get to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd say the most common protocol that we do is big fan of tirzepatide. I'll take semaglutide over nothing, of course, but I just that extra GIP on the tirzepatide seems to be magical. I separate conversation we have about why that might be, but the tirzepatide would be the base. Stacking it with a fat mobilizer like AOD, and then making sure that there's no thyroid issues, ruling that out. If there is a suboptimal thyroid and it's true clinical, getting them on a balanced amount of thyroid so that we can just get that barrier removed. Same thing with inflammation. Is that high? Then doing something extra for the inflammation, like low dose naltrexone or the peptides, and then getting them into the lifestyle changes. And so, most common thing we have to do for patients in the beginning is a reset, both metabolic. I know we don't have enough time to get into it, but a metabolic reset, medication reset. Metabolic reset is, some people call it a reverse diet. I call it a metabolic reset, but it's that 3 to 6 week period of slowly increasing caloric intake over time. Because if you increase it too quickly, you start gaining weight, and then we get back to that mental, like, oh my God, when people are stuck, they're terrified of gaining weight. So you got to go slow and steady with that metabolic reset. But then we also do a medication reset in a lot of cases, because these patients nowadays are coming to us. Not only are they stalled, but they're on like 10 milligrams, 12 or 15 of tirzepatide. They're freaking maxed out. They're maxed out and it's not working as well. And so we do a medication reset where we slowly work with them to get off the medication, 3 week rest period, wash period, treat your body as freaking great as you possibly can so that you get back on the medication. And it's like clockwork. They're on the starter dose or the, maybe 5, and it feels freaking better than it did when they were on 12 or 15. I mean, it's almost every time. So that is huge. That lays the foundation. No long fasting during that period, because you can't, like, no long fasting until you fix the metabolism, get them burning a lot of calories again, get them feeling a lot better. And then you can get into the therapeutic fasting windows. Then you can go keto and or carnivore. And resistance training should have also started from day number 1. Like, resistance training from day number 1 if you can, if that's possible. Big fan of most women and men too, if you don't have a comfort level, is freaking hiring a personal trainer for 5 to 10 sessions. Like, there's, even if you think you know how to work out, getting 5 to 10 sessions It's a couple $100, and it gets you a foundation at whatever gym you work at. You're comfortable now. You walk around. You have a protocol. You have a routine you can do, and your workouts just get way better after that. If you can afford one ongoing, cool. That's awesome. But it's a luxury once you know how to do it. It's essential if you don't know how to work out and you don't know what muscle building workouts actually look like. And then, the side things, if they're a particular issue for the patient, would be the stress piece of it, the sleep piece of it. We usually get into those stages later because collectively less people have those particular issues relative to the others. But when we have that conversation in the beginning, if you are barely sleeping, if you are stressed out of your mind, well, then we got to actually start there because those are huge. So, patients can only do so much from the beginning. So we try to do it in stages. But in a nutshell,
Fantastic.
that's the protocol.
That's a good protocol. So the flow at the beginning, I just refer to it as FLOA. Flow sounds way cooler.
FLOA sounds cool. A lot of people call it FLOA. And I
Uh-huh.
just kind of I'm like, okay, FLOA, flow. Originally I intended for flow, but everyone calls it FLOA now. So I don't know. I'll go with either.
It works. I love it. All right. Desert island peptide.
Oh my gosh. Meaning just my favorite or uh, Um, AOD 9604. I mean, after the GLP-1, GLP-1 would be my favorite. So tirzepatide is my favorite, hands down. And then after tirzepatide would be AOD 9604.
All right. Man, I got my research cut out for me. It's the first time I heard of AOD today. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
Of
Dr.
course.
J, where can people find you and learn more about you and your clinic and what you're doing with clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a link that you can give to your audience where they can just directly come to us and see if it makes sense if they want some help. But they can find me on all socials. YouTube is definitely my best platform if you want to really sink into some topics. I put out 20-minute videos, so I know a lot of people do 7 to 9. I put out 20. I've been maintaining that. I kind of get into it. I might do a 7-minute series just because, but yeah. So we really get into the topics there. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram. TikTok is more of like my 60-second educational videos. And then Instagram, people apparently on Instagram don't want to watch videos, but they want to read and do some sort of carousel thing. So we do that. Some really inspirational things that they can read on Instagram. But yeah, just type in Dr. Jones DC and you'll find me at those areas.
So appreciated. Thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast. Thank you for all of your advice, your wisdom, your knowledge today. Very much appreciate it. Hope to have you back sometime soon. Do you have some
Yeah.
closing thoughts for us on peptides?
My gosh. Yeah, there's no excuse anymore to not get off your ass and get to work now because I know you've tried over and over and over and it feels like why would this time be any different? Well, we got powerful tools now in front of us to make it easier. So remove all those past failures and just freaking push forward because now's your chance to restore your health.
Yeah, freaking do it. I like it. All right, Dr. Jones, thank you again. Great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.